There is a new feminist comedy, if you can even call it that, titled Fitting In. It's a coming-of-age so-called traumedy. Yes, it's about trauma. It's starring Maddie Ziegler, who's famous from the Dance Moms show on TLC. I'm sure she has a lot of trauma that she could channel into this character. So she plays a girl named Lindy, who is 16 years old. She is 22 in real life, I believe. And Lindy is born with a genetic abnormality where she does not have a uterus or a vaginal canal. And that is the catalyst for the entire plot. She has to go through this emotional journey about the fact that she doesn't have a uterus and she doesn't have a period. And it's incredibly vulgar. It's obviously not relatable to 99.999% of people out there, especially teenage girls. But why don't we take a look at the trailer so you guys can get a sense for what we're talking about? It's
we may have to remove it later. If there is copyright, we'll have to move it later. But here we go, guys. Check this out.
Now then, what's the date of your last period?
I haven't gotten it yet.
I'm just starting to wonder, do you want to go see a gynecologist?
I'm sure it's fine. Mom?
Lindy appears to have MRKH syndrome.
What is that?
It's a congenital disorder, resulting in Lindy being born without a uterus, cervix, or vaginal canal.
But the vagina really is just an amazing muscle. You're just going to have to stretch it out. Start off with this little fella, and then you work your way up sort of to this guy. That's the dream there. OMW. Just think of this like vagina boot camp.
What do we have here? Are these butt plugs?
OMW. On my way to you. Good at what I do. OMW.
I'm Jax, and I'm intersex. To own who you are is up to you. No one should ever make you feel ashamed of that. Oh, and I get mad dates too, so don't worry about that.
I just want you to feel like a normal teenage girl.
I'm not normal. Stop trying to fix everything. I'm pissed and sad I can't have a kid. I'm pissed I can't complain about my period.
Being 16 is just bloody hell, isn't it?
Well, I'm gonna let you unpack all of that.
Yeah. So according to the film's official synopsis, Lindy's diagnosis upends her plans to have sex, her presumptions about womanhood and sexuality, her relationship with her mother, and most importantly, herself. The film's director, Molly McGlynn, said, "Making Fitting In was my way of reclaiming parts of myself that I never had or were taken away. I wanted to ask big questions about identity in our bodies without knowing all the answers, because only those living in their body can say what it is or what it isn't. Watch it and think, but laugh too, because finding humor in the absurd is how I survived the horror of learning to accept the body I've been given." What starts out as a more traditional coming-of-age losing your virginity movie gets turned on its head. I was diagnosed with the reproductive disorder MRKH syndrome when I was 16. My single mother was recovering from breast cancer and dealing with losing her breast and changing femininity, and I was learning I lost things I never even knew I lost in the first place. Specifically, a uterus and my vagina. Most of it, anyway. Crazy, right? I know. I had to make a film about it. So this is a creator of a film inserting her own personal story into it and deciding that this should be relatable to the general population.
Yeah. Okay, so on its face, as ridiculous as I find the concept to be, I have no problem with them making this movie. What I have a problem with that is assuming that anyone in the world is going to resonate enough with anyone in the world, any substantial amount of people, that it's actually going to draw money, right? Like, to me, this is something that an independent filmmaker makes on their own, on a shoestring budget, and does so because it's a project they're passionate about. It's something that informed their life growing up. And you can really sink your teeth into something like that and make the art part of who you are. The problem is, when this is done with a budget, and you get actual bigger name actors, and these studios who supposedly claim to want to make a profit, I don't know who this is actually for. I just don't find the subject matter to be general enough to be something that people are going to want to watch. It said coming of age story for a new generation. Are intersex disorders more common in this generation than they were in generations past? Certainly discussions of gender are more common.
What's new is that everyone has to be represented in Hollywood films, even if you represent a tiny, almost negligible fraction of the population. You have to get your representation. And what's funny about this is Maddie Ziegler already got in trouble for making a film with the pop star Sia that was about an autistic girl, because Maddie Ziegler doesn't have autism. Therefore, they decided it was wrong for her to play a character that has autism. Would they say the same thing now that she is not intersex, but playing a character that is intersex?
They shamed Scarlett Johansson out of doing a role as a trans character because she was not trans.
It's happened many times, yes. But I don't see any similar outrage. Maybe as we approach its release, then we'll see more of that discussion around it.
It's not a production company I've ever heard of before. I've never heard of Nice Pictures.
Yeah.
Or was this the same one that was through... Altered Innocence. No, I'm sorry. That was something else.
That was The People's Joker,
No,
right?
I saw another thing recently that also had that label on it.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, wow, is that more than one film now that has that through that production
Yeah, I'm
company?
not sure. But look, I do have a problem with them making a movie about this, actually, because I think that what this is doing is pushing gender ideology on an audience of teenagers. Because essentially what they want you to think is that intersex disorders are far more common than they actually are, so that we can abolish the idea that men and women are different biologically entirely. Every time that you point out the biological difference between men and women, they bring up the exceptions, not the rule, so that they can say, yeah, the difference between men and women doesn't exist altogether. They want this to get a spotlight so that they can continue pushing gender ideology.
It's also rated R, so I don't know who the coming of age part is for, but it's
very weird. I looked at a different trailer for the movie that was more explicit, where she's simulating sex with her female friend. There's a plot line in the movie where she finds out that she has this disorder and then realizes that she can't have sex with her boyfriend. So it gets very explicit. And then there's also a scene, I believe that was in this trailer, where she, like the character Carrie in the Stephen King novel, is drenched with what appears to be menstrual blood. Yeah. This very vulgar obsession with the vagina and with period blood.
Also, remember, guys, when women...
It's very in your face.
When women make that famous quote, it says, men only think about one thing and it's disgusting. It's the women comics and it's the women filmmakers that are making these movies that are so heavily steeped in sexualization. So it's very interesting how much of a fascinating... Look, we just looked at a dress of Gillian Anderson wearing a vagina dress. Like, it doesn't seem like men are the ones that are as obsessed with sex as they pretend. It seems like women are the ones who are obsessed with exploring these topics, at least, when it comes to movies and television. And look, and like you said, you have a problem with it being made. I have, I'm not going to be the person who's going to tell you to censor your art. I am going to call you an idiot when it doesn't make any money. And then you get mad and tell me, why are you such a bigot for not going to see my movie about narrow vaginas?
It's literally a movie about a teenage girl trying to stretch out her vaginal cavity. I find that weird. I find that kind of predatory. I find it to be normalizing pedophilia almost, because you are sexualizing a child. It's very weird. And looking at this synopsis, it says, while other high school kids are competing in sports, dating, having sex, and going to parties, Lindy is spiraling and pushing away her previous sources of trust and comfort, like her best friend Adam and her starring track and field spot.
I'm sure
you could have come up with a premise for that kind of storyline that's more relatable to the general population, right?
I'm guessing that Adam is just adorably non-threatening.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, they could have maybe made a film about a woman who goes through a miscarriage, or a woman who finds out that she's infertile. And that happens to a far greater portion of the population. It would be relatable to them.
I haven't heard.
Why this?
I haven't heard of any of these actors except for Emily Hampshire and Maddie Ziegler. So the rest of them aren't names that I've ever seen before. Molly McGlynn is not a name that I've ever seen before. I do find the idea that these niche topics are supposed to generate money is ridiculous. Like, and this is going to theaters. This is a streaming release if ever I've seen one. Just like Bottoms was a streaming release. Just like Bros should have been a streaming. I'm saying what should have been, not was. They got theater release. None of these movies should be going to theaters because they don't have a broad enough appeal to justify their existence at the theater level.
I don't know if they're expecting to make a huge amount of money off of it, but we'll see if they complain about the response later on.
There's a $20 one here from Gordon Shumway. Says, so is this intersex movie a Gen Z thing? I hate to break it to Gen Z. They are the smallest generation. Gen Alpha and Millennials are much larger. Think Gen X is forgotten. Wait 20 years when Gen Alpha is in their 20s. Gen Z just disappears and nobody cares anymore. Look,
Well, they're also using this to further emphasize the fact that intersex people who have a genetic disorder are included in the umbrella of the LGBTQIA plus HGTV community, when in reality they have nothing in common. Like, what struggle for social acceptance and civil rights do people with genetic disorders have in common with people who identify as a different gender than the one they were so-called assigned at birth?
It's more about pride and feeling different and still being proud of who you are under the banner.
A lot of people are different. It doesn't make them LGBT.
No.
A lot of people are
I'm just
different.
explaining it. I'm not saying it makes sense. I'm saying I'm explaining to you how they feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
yes, I know it went to theaters. What I'm saying, somebody's saying Bros went to theaters. Yes, that's what I said. I said they should have been streaming releases, but they all went to theaters, which is very stupid. Made no sense whatsoever.
Then they complained because it didn't make enough money in the theaters, and they blamed it on homophobia. I don't know. They might blame this movie's failure on intersexophobia.
I'm just waiting for the base director who makes one of these movies and goes, look, the free market has spoken, and I made a movie that didn't appeal to a broad category of people, and I take responsibility for that, and that's just never going to happen.
No. The director, Molly McGlynn, only made one prior debut film.
There we go again with the people who never worked a day before.
It's called Mary Goes Round. It opens with a quote from screenwriter Diablo Cody, hell is a teenage girl, but the descriptor can also work as hell is a teenage girl in a gynecologist's exam. Once again, why are you so obsessed with teenage girls' vaginas? That's really weird. I'm not crazy for calling that weird. I'm not the crazy one. You are. Yeah, it's kind of just a grooming and indoctrination movie, really.
I guess, look, the movies that men make and the movies that women make are always going to be different. It just feels like the movies that men tend to gravitate towards making, for the most part, have a better general wide audience appeal. When a guy makes a movie about a superhero and he casts a strong, capable male protagonist, that appeals to men and it appeals to women for different reasons. When a woman makes a movie about women's issues, because that seems to be what female directors have been subjugated to in these industries, they don't make the movies with wide appeal, because even when they try to do that, it seems like they have to shoehorn in their own issues, which have nothing to do with the story. So there's just no wide appeal. But that's because men's issues, on the whole, people don't really care. Like, people don't care about like the longer prison sentences for men. They don't. If you don't believe that that's true, think of the amount of people who will talk to you about Me Too and in the abhorrent nature of sex crimes, who will absolutely make a prison R-word joke if it's about a person that they don't like going to jail. They will absolutely do that. People don't really care about men's issues, so men have to make movies about ideas that appeal to all people on some level. And since women are not held to that same standard, this is going to keep happening. It's not really rocket science.
Right. Yeah. This tweet you sent me from Mike Harlow about this is how I found out about it. And he said, because some women don't have vaginas, or they have very narrow vaginas or something. Bigot.
Yes.
And he said, how could I have forgotten the part where they dump period blood on her? They don't specify that it's period blood, but you know it's gonna be period blood. This is also my face while watching this.
Technically, there is no other explanation for this other than this being a scene from Carrie that this scene makes any sense. That this picture makes any sense.
He said he Googled the syndrome, and it turns out that this character does in fact have a vagina. It's just a very narrow vagina.
Hate it when that happens.
This syndrome is also prevalent in hunchbacks. You learn something new every day. It's Maddie Ziegler, the same actress who played the R chick in that Sia movie that went super well. I wonder how the trans intersexuals will react to a woman with a vagine playing a woman without a vagine. Totally reasonably, I'm sure.
It's really interesting how like they speak to the high heavens, they shout from the rooftops about how much more common all of this stuff is, but then it always flies in the face of the money that's made back on it. Right? So they're like, there's a market for this, there's a wide audience for this, but then since nobody actually shows up, it doesn't really prove your point very well. So is the art just bad, or is it less common than you say it is?
A traumedy. What do you think of that term?
That's just awful. Dramedy is a term. Traumedy is just very 2024.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.